daughter is a Star Wars fan, the first thing they're going to ask for are the figures.
The reason they're 3 inches tall is because the first mock-up figures that I made were Fisher-Price Adventure People.
Welcome back to GFT. Here is a new episode with your host Chris B. Thanks for tuning in. This will be fun. Let's discuss figures and the latest toy run from a galaxy far, far away. Let's dive into the news and what's next in your display. From the Black Series to TVC, from Hasbro to the Kenner Legacy. 3 inches, 6 inches tall. Galactic figure talk covers it all. Displaying, rearranging the collection. Discussing figures, asking Hasbro for perfection. The thrill of the hunt, filling gaps is the mission. Always on the move, always wanting mint condition.
I have 3 of each, 1 to display, 1 to open, and 1 just in case.
We finally launched 6-inch when I felt the time was right.
Displaying, rearranging the collection.
I am Boba Fett. I cost more.
Discussing figures, asking Hasbro for perfection. The thrill of the hunt, filling gaps is the mission. Always on the move, always wanting mint condition. Rapid firing vet, the early bird kit. So many topics to cover, which one to pick? Bent corners or creases on the card. Are bubbles too big, obstructing the art? Super articulation or 5POA? Soft good robes or plastic capes? Okay, maybe a live stream or pipeline reveal. Clearance find or an online deal. Whatever the topic may be, it's all driven by the GFT community. Rearranging the collection.
I don't think I ever left the DeLorean guard behind.
Discussing figures, asking Hasbro for perfection.
Listen to the waves. Don't you hear it? The lightsaber.
The hunt, filling gaps is the mission. Always on the move, always wanting mint condition. Display, rearranging the collection. Discussing figures, asking Hasbro for perfection. The thrill of the hunt, filling gaps is the mission. Always on the move, always wanting mint condition.
The action figures are still exceedingly important.
400 people lined up in the cold drizzle at midnight to be the first to get their hands on the new Star Wars merchandise.
I'm Luke Skywalker here rescuing
So without further ado, here is Chris B with a brand new episode of GFT.
Welcome to another episode of GFT Galactic Figure Talk. My name is Chris B, and this episode is a look back at 2024 and collecting the 3/3/4 inch line, the vintage collection, but also I think we need to talk about Disney's Droid Factory line in 2024 as well, because they've released some amazing stuff this year. Now, if you haven't done so yet, go back one episode and listen to the vintage collection Ghost review that I put out a couple of days ago, because that's not something that I'll be covering on this episode of the podcast. If you're into the 6-inch Black Series line, please have a look at the episode that's going to come out after this one, because that's going to cover the 6-inch line from Hasbro. So without any further delay, let's talk about 2024 and 3/3/4 inch collecting. Now, when I sat down for 2024 and took a look back at the year to see what was going on with Star Wars and 3/3/4 inch, I realized that it was an extremely expensive year. There is a ton of product. And not necessarily a lot of new figures or new characters per se, but there was still a lot of stuff to get. And there was still, despite quite a few shortcomings in 2024, there was still a lot of stuff to get excited about. But let's take a look at Star Wars Entertainment first, because we got 3 TV shows in 2024 with Tales of the Empire that came out on May the 4th. Then we had, of course, the Acolyte TV series, which in the end, unfortunately, did not deliver for most of us. And then currently we have the Skeleton Crew, which I'm full on board with, and I love so far what they've been doing with this show. So in that regards, it was a bit hit and miss when it comes to the entertainment. but it looks like they're finishing strong with the Skeleton Crew, at least 5 episodes in so far. As far as the 3 3/4 inch line goes, I think that Hasbro's been keeping us really, really busy. I mean, there were announcements constantly throughout the year. I think I counted over 30 press emails that I got this year. So if you keep in mind that we only have 52 weeks in the year and there's over 30 press emails from Hasbro alone, that means that there was basically an announcement every 2 weeks or even more than a 2-week break. So yeah, they've been keeping us really busy, and there is definitely a burnout that I'm feeling for myself, but also in the Galactic Figures community when it comes to pre-orders. There's a definite burnout, and I'm gonna talk about this a little later in this episode. But let's talk about all the cool stuff that came out in 2024 for TVC. And of course, I have to start off with the big kahuna, which is the Ghost vehicle that just was released at the end of 2024. And I talked about it last year already on the podcast, but now that it is in people's hands and people can actually put this into their collections, that is pretty amazing. I actually just watched the very first season of Star Wars Rebels with my daughter again. We binged the whole thing in 2 days, and the Ghost is constantly featured in the show. And to see it on screen and then taking a peek into the collection and having it stand there and being just such an impressively huge vehicle is pretty cool. So yes, that was pretty amazing in 2024 that they actually released the Ghost. We also got the E-Wing vehicle, which that by itself is also pretty amazing. I mean, if you grew up with Star Wars in the 90s and we're here, like 3 decades later, and they actually put out the E-Wing for 3 3/4 inch figures, I mean, come on, that is pretty astonishing. And if you're even older than that and you grew up with Star Wars in the 80s, and you see how Hasbro just released a Blurg in the 3 3/4 inch line, that is pretty amazing as well. Now, granted, it's Mandalorian themed, of course, because we gotten a better look and it's gotten a whole lot of screen time in Mando. But still, I mean, all those years later, and they've made that in the 3 3/4 inch line. And hey, I'm all on board for that, and I think the Blurg itself turned out perfectly, and it also fits really nicely into the Razor Crest on top of that. So yeah, pretty excited that the creatures are back, and you probably know by now that they've also announced the Howler with Sabine Wren coming in 2025. That's based on the Ahsoka TV series, so it looks like the creature assortment is going to continue, and hey, I'm all here for it. Now, besides the 2 vehicles and the creature assortment now being back, we also kept seeing new playsets coming out for 3 3/4 inch, which is pretty cool. We got the Moff Gideon Imperial Light Cruiser Hallway, and we got the Armorer's Forge. In my book, I think both of those playsets deliver. I mean, those kinds of display pieces or diorama pieces are instant. You open the box, there is not a lot of stuff that you have to do to assemble it, and you place it on your shelf, add a bunch of figures, and it looks great. Really, really does. Especially the modular approach for the Imperial Light Cruiser. If you have the budget and if you have the room, you can go as big as you want, you can go as long as you want, you can build around a corner, you can put them back to back. It's really, really cool that they are doing that. And that is something that the collecting community has been advocating for going back to the mid-2000s. If you guys remember that, when we were asking for Hasbro to do a Death Star and do the modular approach for that. And it's really cool that they're actually doing that with the playsets. And of course, we've seen that a few times now in the 3 3/4 inch line. But I'm very happy to see that Hasbro's been continuing this in 2024. Now, the Forge itself is also pretty cool. It is just a place that you can put all your Mando figures in and just have them hang out, Even though it's actually not really that big, but if you can make it big, because you have the cabinet that comes with it, and you can just place it a little further away from the Forge. And I mean, you can really make this a cool looking display. So again, 2024, creatures are back, playsets continue. We got 2 really cool vehicles, and that's all awesome stuff in my book. Now, one set, which I also have to bring up, that was pretty cool was Jabba the Hutt 8D8 and the single-carded Salacious Crumb on the mini card. For a lot of new collectors, I think this set was heaven sent, because it really gives us a really good Jabba the Hutt figure. Although there are some Jabba the Hutt figures that had a really funky paint application around the neck, including the one that I actually have now. It has some red markings and what have you, but overall the sculpt is great, and the set fits perfectly into, Boba Fett or Jabba's throne room playset that they have on Hasbro Pulse. And again, that is such a cool playset and diorama piece that I think this really needs to be in everyone's collection. And yeah, 2024 and Jabba the Hutt, that was a pretty cool looking set. Now, 2024 also saw the return of the vintage collection to HasLab, again, after having the successful Ghost the year before. And I mean, come on, it is mind-blowing that they're doing the Mos Eisley Cantina. And not just that, they're also doing the Tonica Sisters. Figures that the community has been asking for 2 decades, basically. And there's always been a community-driven effort behind the Tonica Sisters. And, it flares up, it goes back down, but then it always kind of comes back, just kind of the way it was with the Sail Barge, where there was a big community effort to get that vehicle made, and all the fan sites put the banners on their websites, and people kept asking Hasbro at Q&As to finally make this vehicle, and it just never happened until 2019. And that's the way it feels with the Tonica Sisters here. It's just something that just never went away. And in the end, in 2024, they actually delivered on that. And sure, we don't have the figures yet in our hands, but just the fact that it funded and that they're actually making those figures is pretty mind-blowing. And, every now and then we need to pinch ourselves that they are still making those figures based on a movie that's almost 50 years old. 50 years, you guys. And they're still making toys based on that. And yeah, so in that regards, 2024 was pretty amazing, really. I mean, we get big vehicles, we get smaller size vehicles, we have creatures, we have play sets, we get figures that we've been asking for decades. We finally get a Mos Eisley Cantina that's not just a cardboard backdrop. It looks like it's something that's going to be substantial. It's big. It gives us room to display our 40 or 50 Cantina figures that we currently have already in our collections. And just like the Jabba's Palace playset, it gives our figures an instant home. And yeah, 2024 in that regards is pretty awesome, even though we don't have it yet. Right? I mean, that's going to be the big item in 2025. But just the fact that they went ahead and they made this available and said, hey, community, if you guys really want this, here it is. This is your shot at it. And like previous vintage collection HasLabs, the community stepped up and they put their wallet where their mouth was, and it funded. Now, we didn't reach all the goals. We didn't reach all the tiers. There's one figure that we missed out on, but hopefully Hasbro is going to release this one single carded down the road. Now, when I look at all the figures that they've released for TVC, I counted a total of 72 this year, which is slightly down from a little over 80 from the year prior, but about the same figures. And it always depends on how you count the figures. You guys know I do count Grogu as its own figure, for example. So some people might consider that to be more of an accessory, for example. But I also do count Lothcats as their individual figures as well. Simply because if I do that, then I can give those figures their own entry on the website, and this gives you guys the opportunity to compare those figures more easily and side by side with all these images, that you can make a more informed decision whether that's something that you actually want to add to your collection or not. So I counted about 72 figures in 2024, and originally my plan was to go through each of those and talk about each of those figures here on the podcast, but I found that it just ends up being me rambling on about each figure. And so I'm gonna keep this one brief for the most part. And the one thing I've noticed for TVC in 2024 is that it just feels very stale and very boring to collect 3 3/4 inch figures, unfortunately, even though they were good figures this year. But we've gotten 3 versions of Din Djarin, for example, this year. There were 2 Ahsoka Tano figures, which one felt, again, incomplete because she was missing the cape that she wore on Peridia for most of the time in the Ahsoka TV series. And then there's figures like the Armorer, for example, where I feel like, yeah, they've done a great job this year in 2024 upgrading this figure by giving her the soft goods on the back and also including a jetpack for her. So that is a nice upgrade to the one we already have. And that is exactly my issue. It is a figure which we already have in our collection. That's the same way I feel about the recent Bo-Katan release, for example, where you have to really compare the figures side by side to understand what is different now for this one, besides the picture on the packaging, right? The same goes for Axe Wolves, where they give us the Season 3 version, but then they screw up the chest armor and it doesn't look right. But basically, it feels something we just recently purchased already. And here it is again. And then here is a cape missing, or here is the wrong chest armor. So, and then besides getting figures like the Armorer, Bo-Katan, Axe Wolves, Din Djarin figures, Grogu figures, all those characters which we have seen plenty of in the past 4 or 5 years now, we also get updates to figures which we have 40 or 50 of in our collections. Okay, I know people wanted a new Count Dooku figure. 2024 delivered on that. The same goes for Princess Leia in her A&H outfit. We all wanted an upgrade. Here she is, but it feels like that's a character and a figure that I do have like 50 times in my collection. So the point I'm trying to make is that it feels stale, really, really stale. And there is a complete lack of support for new media entertainment. They've released 1 figure from the Skeleton Crew and only 3 figures from the Acolyte. Okay? And you can think of the Acolyte whatever you want, of course. But for me personally, I still want to see the main cast, the main crew from the Acolyte. There are some cool characters in this show, and I would love to see those, especially the Jedi crew. I would love to get a Mother Anisea just to round out the cast and give us the Stranger, of course, the bad guy. Those figures, I feel like, should have been in the line to promote the show. And the same goes for the Skeleton Crew. I mean, just look at the plethora of amazing characters that have popped up in the Skeleton Crew. It's amazing. I mean, the entire pirate crew is awesome. The kids are awesome. Hopefully, Hasbro is going to do a course correction here and start focusing TVC on new media entertainment. Because quite honestly, how else are you going to sustain this line if you don't cater to people coming into the hobby with those kinds of figures? Most of the people who are collecting these days did not grow up with the original trilogy in the 70s and the 80s. That's the minority of the people these days. Okay? I mean, we've been seeing this trend for a couple of years now. Actually, more than a couple of years. I mean, we're still missing most of the crew for Andor. I think for Andor, they've only done 6 figures, and 3 of them are Andor figures. Kind of kit bashed. One using the wrong legs even. And then we have, K2SO, which is a repack. So, in terms of support for Andor, it looks really bad. You also know that a lot of people want the Bad Batch crew, for example. So, Hasbro should really start focusing on new media entertainment because that is where the focus is at. That keeps the line fresh. Everything else just feels so incredibly stale. And that's what I think 2024 was. Just kind of felt stale. And since I'm already in complain mode now, let's talk about the deluxe line for TVC. What the happened there, Hasbro? They take the boxes away, remove all the accessories or the possibilities of accessories that they could have given us, like heavy E-Web cannons, charging compartments for Dark Troopers. They could have packed all kinds of crates in there. They could have given us moisture evaporators in the deluxe line. Remember those cool flames that they gave us with the Incinerator Trooper that you could put outside of the Navarro Cantina playset? Yeah, those kinds of things. That's what the deluxe line was for. That's what I thought, at least. And look what they did in 2024. They just got rid of that completely. They make the cardboard larger so that now the figures don't fit into the collection anymore when you put them on the wall because they're completely a different shape, basically. And they put the figures on a single blister. I mean, come on, that is absolutely ridiculous. And they're charging you $25 for this when it feels like it should be a regularly priced figure. Now, I don't really see a whole lot of complaints about it, but I do see that people are voting with their wallets because Cobb Vanth, as much as everybody wanted to get this figure, has not sold out at Walmart, at Target, and at Amazon, even though it's sitting there for $11. Okay, people are voting with their money in this regards, and I think that is great because Hasbro needs to course correct the deluxe line. This is not working. And having Cop Vanth sit at Target for $25 when he first came out, right next to Black Series figures, which cost the same price, that is not okay. Something has gone wrong here with the pricing, okay? Something has gone wrong. Remember when TVC started? $10 a figure? Even in 2013 when TVC ended, it was $10 a figure, and Black Series figures were twice that. So why are we looking at the same price now for both lines? So something has gone wrong within Hasbro. Is it pressure from the community that they now think that they need to make these figures better than they were before because they need to have barbell jointed hips because then there's like two people complaining that their figures can't do a split? Is it the rocker ankles that are now skyrocketing the price? I don't know what it is, but I know that something has gone wrong, and the deluxe line is the perfect poster child for that. Okay? And those figures are not selling at $25, even though Cop Vanth is a much-liked character and a character that people have been asking for, and we're pretty vocal about for years at this point. So the deluxe line in 2024, for me personally, huge mistake and a big fail. And you don't hear me say that often. I do complain about stuff and I do point things out that I don't like, but you'll never hear me say that I think that something was a huge mistake. But I think the deluxe line, the way it's priced right now, removing the extra accessories like the charging compartments or the heavy E-web cannon kinds of stuff that you could put with deluxe figures, and which you have put with deluxe figures, Hasbro, for the same price, and then just taking those things out and selling the figures at regular $25 price, that's not a good thing. Jango Fett is kind of the same victim here in that regards, where I feel like that's another figure that could have been, just a single carded release. Why? Simply because that's what they've done in the past. If there has been a change when it comes to 3 3/4 inch figures in the way things are being manufactured or things have gotten so expensive when it comes to paint, then maybe they need to communicate that a little bit better. But then also explain to me why Black Series figures have not increased in price like that. Okay? Anyways, Deluxe line 2024, a big fail. Now, another thing which I noticed is the lack of paint on the figures. You guys know, if you've been collecting for a while, the figures, Star Wars figures, are not Marvel figures. They're not comic book characters that are just all clean. We've always gotten a wash on our figures, a little bit of dirt on the boots, stuff like that. That feels like it's completely out of the window at this point for Hasbro. They're just not painting the figures like they used to. And it's very noticeable at this point. I keep saying this, Star Wars is not Marvel. Okay, and I think it's sad to see that if we're in 2024 and the figures aren't painted as good as they were like a decade ago. Look at the Aura Sync comparison pictures that I posted on Instagram, where you see how they paint the accessories nowadays with less paint on them than they did back in 2012. That was 12 years ago, and they painted those figures better. We do see an improvement in the way the figures are being made. I mean, the inkjet on the face, they've really dialed that in. That's cool. We see more articulation than before, typically, with the barbell hips and everything. But just to go back on the paint application and just not weather those figures at all anymore, terrible. I'll find that to be really, really a letdown. You have some figures that don't need to be weathered, obviously, like a Jedi Master Soul when he's in his Jedi robe. Sure, give me a clean version of him. But then you have Osha, which was also a really good figure in 2024, which is completely clean. So clean that it looks very plasticky. Even though you can see the effort that Hasbro put into the figure, right? It's nicely sculpted, tons of accessories with the backpack and the blaster and the harness and 2 different pip droids included. So they did a really, and removable vest on top of that. So they did a really good job with Osha, but the paint application is just not there. Just, a little bit of paint on the boots, maybe on the pants, but no, nothing. And one of the biggest offenders here in this regards is Cop Vanth in the deluxe line for $25, right? They weathered the armor, the Boba Fett armor nicely, but then they didn't paint the pants at all or the boots, even though he's been on Tatooine the whole time and should be a little dusty. But yeah, again, nothing. And that is a huge letdown if you compare that to figures from like 10 years ago, or even not that long ago. But yeah, I mean, that's in 2024 very apparent that when it comes to the paint application, there are definitely cost-saving measures in place, and it's a letdown for me personally. Another example I want to give is the E-Wing vehicle, which is basically entirely unpainted. They didn't even include any stickers for the cockpit. I think the cockpit has like one button or one panel painted or something like that. Other than that, I mean, this is basically an entirely unpainted vehicle, right? It's all clean. Look at the bottom of the Ghost HasLab. There is no weathering on the bottom of this vehicle whatsoever. Almost the entire hull on the bottom of this ship is unweathered. So those are my 3 big complaints for 2024. The lack of support for media entertainment, the lack of paint on the figures, and what they've done with the deluxe assortment is not working for me personally. 2024 was the 25th anniversary of The Phantom Menace, and it was basically entirely ignored by Hasbro. They've done stuff for 6-inch, but the 3 3/4 inch line got the shaft. Big time. I think the only figure that's worth mentioning here is the Disney Droid Factory line with TC-14. And even though they use some sort of, reflective paint on the figure, it is not a VEC metallized version of TC-14 like we got back in 1999, which the paint application still looks way better than what we got this year in 2024 from Disney. But at least the Disney Droid Factory line's been pretty interesting this year because they've put out a ton of droids. We've seen, of course, all those seasonal droids. They've done one for Pride Month this year. They've done a holiday figure and a Halloween figure this year like they always do. Plus, they gave us TC-14 for the Phantom Menace anniversary. They also had a D23 Expo exclusive droid this year with R6-D23. And those were all the single carded figures. But they also came out with a 4-pack in early January of 2024 based on the Ahsoka TV show, which included Professor Huyang, RD3, C4, R4C, and Chopper. Droid Factory was really popping this year, but they also had an additional 6 droids in the mystery crates this year. And those droids are all based on the Galaxy's Edge attraction at Disney World and Disneyland. So yeah, there were an additional 6 Droid Factory droids for 3 3/4 inch that you could track down. And then there were an additional 7 Droid Factory droids for Christmas in their 2024 Advent calendar. So when you count all the Disney Droid Factory droids, which they come out with in 2024, you have 7 Advent calendar figures, 6 mystery droids, 3 Star Speeder droids, 4 Ahsoka droids in a 4-pack, and 5 single-carded droids, which adds up to a total of 25 Disney Droid Factory droids for 2024. That's a huge number. Now, that's not where it all ends, though, because Disney also came out with the Star Speeder 3000, and that is, hands down, my favorite vehicle of the year. There is just so much built into this thing, and it just came out of nowhere, and it's totally amazing. So, with that vehicle, though, were also a few figures. They included 2 Captain Rex figures, the original Captain Rex, 1 carded, and 1 loose that you could use within the cabin. And they also included R2-D2 that you can place on the top of the ship in the socket there. And the vehicle, I talked about it on a previous podcast episode when the vehicle came out. So please go back and listen to that review if you want to hear me talk about it and explain some of the features. But overall, the Star Speeder 3000 is a thing of beauty. Now, I would say that the plastic that they used isn't quite as good as what Hasbro uses for their HasLabs, for example. At least it doesn't feel as sturdy. I would also say that the details in the Star Speeder 3000 are softer than what we're getting with the Ghost. But it's just that it feels it's the complete package. From the beginning, when you walk onto the attraction, the way the doors open, you hear the chime, the lights come on, the way the chairs look inside the cabin, the same color, all the details that you remember in the ship are built into the cabin and the cockpit. Of course, you have a base that you can place it on, so you can have it in flight mode, or you can just have it stand on its own on its landing gear. The base lights up, illuminates the vehicle from the bottom up. You have the engines that light up. You have the front lights that light up. You have laser cannons that light up. You have interior lights that light up. You have all kinds of different voice samples from the attraction built into this ship, from the chime when the doors open to all kinds of Captain Rex phrases that he says. You have breakaway panels on this ship. I feel myself constantly exploring this thing and pushing different buttons and having it do different things. I mean, there's a button that opens up the laser cannons on the front, and then even the laser cannons have lights, little red LEDs on the front that light up when you press them and make the sound, the shooting sound. It's just an amazing vehicle. And then, of course, you know, they have the 4.5 inch LCD screen on the front of the cabin that plays the attraction. I mean, that's just mind-blowing. And then also, on top of that, they're syncing the cabin lights to what's happening on screen. So if there's green laser blasts, the cabin lights up green. If they fly through the crystals, the cabin lights up blue. I mean, come on. It's done so extremely well that, you know, for me, even this year, it beats the Ghost. You know, that's how I feel about it. It definitely beats the Ghost. Now, if you didn't grow up with Star Tours in the 80s and you've never been on the attraction, this ship probably means absolutely nothing to you. But if you've been to Disneyland and Disney World and you remember the original attraction and the color scheme that it had and how much fun it was to go on this ride and to see all those droids, it's just a really cool ship to have in the collection and something that a lot of people have been wanting for a long time. And so, yeah, in that regards, Disney's Droid Factory line delivered big time in 2024. I also really like the customer first approach here, where they include a carded version of the exclusive figure and a loose one. They do not force you to buy two of this vehicle, so you can have that in your collection. And that's not what we're seeing with Hasbro at all. Hasbro is trying to sell as many units as they possibly can. They know that if you want a second set of Tonica Sisters carded, you'll have to shell out another $400 for that. Not the case here with what Disney did. And that does not go unnoticed. Another cool aspect of the Starspeeder 3000 is that Disney and Hasbro in the past also have released a ton of figures, a ton of droids based on the attraction. So if you want to build out a diorama, you have a lot of options to actually populate the vehicle and build around it. You don't have to go and beg Disney to start making Star Tours characters now. So that's much appreciated, Disney. Thank you. All right, so that's really it for 3 3/4 inch and 2024. Again, you know, even though I complain about Hasbro and TVC, it is because that's where the main focus is for me personally. I've always been a 3 3/4 inch collector, one of each since 95 basically. And of course, you know, I take a very close look at what Hasbro does. And I think they're getting a lot of things right. The one main complaint, the paint application aside, and the weird thing that they're doing with Deluxe now, is just that it feels a little stale for me overall. I'm looking for new stuff. I'm looking for the Jot Nut Nawoods. I'm looking for the Jedi Master Souls, the Oshas, the May Assassins. I'm looking for characters which I do not have in my collection. Re-releasing Darth Vader on an A&H card or a Stormtrooper on an A&H card, even remaking Princess Leia on an A&H card, remaking Count Dooku, that's not the stuff I am looking for, okay? I have super articulated Count Dooku figures in my collection, and yes, it should be in TVC. I'm glad they made it, sure, but it still feels stale. Because we have those figures in our collections. And not just one. There are options that you can pick up on the secondary market and probably actually get those figures cheaper than what you're paying for in TVC now. So that's my gripe with TVC. I think the constant repacks, the constant repaints, the constant kit bashes. I mean, figures like Cal Kestis in his Imperial uniform, right? I mean, okay, sure, it's a character that we have not received before. The figure turned out great. They used the generic Imperial officer body for it. Sure, I get it. Was that an essential character to make from the game? No, it was not. I'm looking to get the crew, the whole crew that's rolling with Cal Kestis in Jedi Order, in Jedi Survivor. Those are the kinds of figures I'm looking for. And yes, I understand the cost-saving measures here, but it feels extremely stale. And I also see a huge burnout and a huge turnoff in the collecting community because of the constant repacks and repaints. I mean, Hasbro is getting critiqued constantly now these days. And in a lot of ways, I feel it's justified. And it all comes down to the newness in the line and just how stale it feels. Now, another issue which TVC has is, of course, the 6-inch line. Because you can add to the staleness that you're getting a character in 6-inch, and then you're getting it in 3 3/4 inch as well. So you're seeing it twice. You see Cobb Vanth in the Black Series 6-inch line for like 2 years, and then they're making it in 3 3/4 inch, but it's still Cobb Vanth. And probably a lot of times people already picked up the 6-inch version just because there isn't a 3 3/4 inch. You just kind of want to have something on the shelf. You know, there's quite a few people like that. Again, it just adds to the staleness when you see the same 2 characters in different sizes. That is definitely another issue that TVC faces. And again, that was pretty apparent in 2024. I'm gonna leave it at that, and I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts on how you feel about TVC in 2024. Let me know your thoughts. You can find me on Instagram, of course, under Galactic Figures. I'm on Facebook with galacticfigures.com. And I think the best place to discuss things, though, is in the Facebook group for Galactic Figures, simply because it feels like there you can have different threads going and actually discuss stuff properly. I'll put the link to all of those social media accounts for Galactic Figures in the podcast description, so you can find me there. And I'm curious to hear you guys' thoughts on how you think 2024 went for TVC and what you're looking forward to the most in 2025. Now, one thing which I haven't talked about yet is the top 5 for TVC in 2024. And the poll or the voting is going to come up on galacticfigures.com in the coming days. I'm obviously way behind on stuff that I wanted to get done before the year's over. But I still have 4 figures to add with the Ghost Crew now. And once those are added to the website, I'll start running the poll and we can all vote on the top 5 figures for TVC and for the Black Series line as well. And the next Galactic Figure Talk podcast episode is going to be about the Black Series line in 2024. So thank you for still hanging around in 2024 and supporting galacticfigures.com and myself with the podcast and listening to the podcast. I hope you guys have a very successful, a wonderful, and very healthy 2025, and Happy New Year.